Hello, and welcome to the Women in Product podcast. Today, my guest is Japna Sethi, a product growth leader and strategic thinker with a diverse set of experiences, making up a dynamic career with many angles to talk about today. Currently, she's a product growth leader at Jira, and she consults on product growth and go-to-market strategy with multiple clients. She has served as director of growth at Calendly, as interim head of monetization at Otter.ai, and she built and led the growth team at Product Board from the ground up. Japna has been at the forefront of driving growth at leading technology companies like Dropbox, and has also been an active angel investor and advisor in cutting-edge products like HeadsUp.ai, Curate, Dupt, and Loops. Her expertise ranges from growth, mobile, productivity, and collaboration to digital health and hardware. Overall, she specializes in helping B2B products establish growth strategies and teams in order to help them scale post-product market fit. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. Happy to be here.
We're really excited to talk to you because this is an interesting time, I guess, for anybody in the product management career area. There's a lot going on. It's a very dynamic space. And what was really interesting to read about your bio is that you've been extremely versatile and moved around a lot into different roles with slightly different angles. So we're just curious, what would you say you are today? What is, the definition of what you do for people?
Yeah, great question. So, as you mentioned in the introduction, I've been exploring a bunch of different angles throughout my career. Where I've spent the most time is doing product management, mostly at early and growth stage startups, although most recently I joined Atlassian, very large organization, multi-product. But I also pursue other hobbies on the side. I've done some advising, I've done some design partnerships, I've done some angel investing as well. And most recently, I'm learning about real estate as we have started a family and we're thinking about where to live and where my child can go to school. But to sum it all up, I would say that as I continue to learn more about what others are doing, what types of technologies people are developing and or can be leveraged in different ways, and also different problems that I encounter through talking to other people via what they're encountering and how people want to solve it, I just get very excited intellectually about solving things faster than we ever could before. And I can't solve all of the problems myself. So I really love to talk to other people about how to solve them and also give any input or advice if I have any to share to help them across their journey. So that's kind of how I've ended up pursuing, full-time career in product management, but also entertaining some of these other avenues as well.
And how did you get into all of this initially? What is your background and what did you study in school?
I actually studied material science and physics in school. Very different background than perhaps the typical product manager. But when I started working in hardware, and I did some roles that required a lot of customer relationship management as well as working with engineers and trying to oversee technology roadmap that spanned 3 to 5 years in advance. So essentially, the phone device that you have in your hand today or the laptop that you have today, the technology that is a part of that is what we were thinking about. How are people going to use electronics 3 to 5 years from now? And it was a very established, but very tough place to be, and lots of advancements from a technological standpoint. Over time, I felt like it's very established. I know the players, and the players are, for the most part, going to be the same. And I wanted to see if there was something different. And I live in the Bay Area. I have a network here. And I learned about software and how software was changing rapidly. And so I ended up switching from hardware to software. And from then on, never left, continued to learn more about different B2B, B2C models, studied product growth as a subdiscipline of product management, just learn from other functions. And lo and behold, on that journey, I created a network of my own of people who were doing similar types of work or operating in similar industries. And as they moved on and they found new problems to solve, I became very interested in the problems that they were solving. But as I mentioned before, you can't work everywhere, but you can try to stretch yourself and diversify the types of problems that you are educating yourself about and thinking about through these different types of partnerships, whether it's advising or whether it's investing. And so over time, as that network grew and I learned more, I started to pursue those types of avenues.
Well, it's really interesting that you had that kind of a background. I'm curious to see what you really like about product work over and above perhaps working on hardware design or whatever you set out to do initially.
Yeah. I would say that I still did product work when I was working in hardware. It's just that the feedback cycles are so much longer because you can't just A/B test like you can in software. So the requirements are different and the time to market is different. And the number of products you're going to launch is generally smaller because there's so much packed into one thing. But I have a very analytical background. I have a background in physics and material science. And so, in the pursuit of that study, I had to learn a lot of statistics. And the way we think about things comes from the scientific method. And so, when I started to learn about the analytical portions of product management and specifically some of the principles within growth, I found that those two resonated very well together. And I could apply some of these same principles from one discipline to the other. And it just came very naturally to me. I tend to lean analytically in the first place. So I just started to pursue that avenue even more. And as growth became a discipline that grew from, used to be more concentrated in social and mobile, just from a consumer perspective, but now it's grown to B2B. And now we have a version of growth that drives an entire go-to-market motion, product-led growth, and also like this combo product-led sales. It's really evolved from where it was over 10 years ago.
Yeah, I was in growth as well. So when you say the scientific method applies, I completely agree. I think people maybe don't see that parallel, but can you talk a little bit about that?
When you are studying something in a lab and you are trying to understand the principles behind it or prove a hypothesis, you do some work to create some synthesis of insights. And then, based on that synthesis, you say, I want to know if I create a composition of a material like this, that it has these properties. My hypothesis is that I think I can get some material that has these properties. Let me test different versions and create different versions or iterations, then test for those properties to see how close I can get. And then also I need to test it a certain number of times, and I need to make sure I get the results that don't overlap with each other, but are actually statistically significantly different in order to actually prove my hypothesis that I can create this material that does have these special characteristics that can be used in some practical application. And what I just said, if you've done experimentation in a product management setting or a similar setting, you might have resonated with what I just said. You do some customer research, or you get some insights from the market, or you get some insights from your teardowns or UX teardowns, and you come up with a hypothesis of what the problem is and why you think you can solve it in a certain way. Maybe you come up with a few different explorations of how you can solve it. You pick the one or two things that you think have the most confidence, and then you test that. And you measure the results, you try to strive for statistical significance, and then you measure if it actually is going to make an impact or not. Maybe one of those iterations wasn't a good one, and then you have to try another one. And you either prove or disprove your hypothesis over time. It's very similar. That process is very similar to what you might do in a lab. And some of the underlying statistics is also very similar to what you might do in a lab.
Yeah, and I know you were talking earlier about various strengths that people can have. How would you advise somebody who has multiple interests, strengths, similar to you yourself, to figure out what is the best path for them? How do you know where you're really going to succeed and be able to make the biggest impact?
That's a good question. I'd say that I one is to have a growth mindset, to always continuously be learning and finding what interests you that is a little bit separate or peripheral to what you're already doing. That way, you always have some feelers out there. And when you find a spark, you can pursue that and spend a little bit more time there. The other piece is to keep track of or know your strengths. Like try to reflect on yourself or get some feedback from people you work with or people around you to see what your strengths are. You might be surprised. They might highlight something that you haven't thought of before and try to really double down on that strength. That's kind of why, I moved from a very scientific background into software product management, but I took the strengths, my analytical abilities with me and I reapplied them because I knew that those were my strengths. And when I started to put the feelers out and I found growth as a subdiscipline and how that was changing, I said, oh, I'm really good at this, but I've never done it this way. Let me see if I can apply it that way. And you just keep doing that. Now I would say growth is my strength, but I'm learning new things. And for example, I'm at Atlassian. I'm learning how to operate in a very matrix multi-product organization that is evolving incredibly rapidly. That's something that is a bit new for me, given that, yes, had most of my experience at earlier growth stage startups, it's much smaller organizations. And I'm trying to take the strengths that I do have, the collaborative strengths that I have, the analytical ability that I have, putting the customer first and saying, okay, let me use those strengths and try to apply that to this new challenge. That I would say is a way that you can, one, know yourself, but two, try to put feelers out there to see how else you can apply yourself and how else you can learn and just have that continuous growth and learning mindset. Because there isn't really ever an end to learning. You just continue to learn throughout the rest of your life.
Yeah, and you mentioned networking as being important. It sounds like something that maybe you're especially good at. What are your tips for getting your own network going so that you have more opportunities to learn from people?
Yeah, it's a great question. Some people who are perhaps more extroverted, you'll probably find networking easier. I'll admit I'm more introverted. I'm probably the person who's gonna listen more than talk. And meeting with large groups of people takes energy away from me. But I've found that I've been able to network successfully just trying to be authentic and being myself instead of trying to show up and be a completely different person. And through that, I can develop relationships with people who see my authenticity and value my authenticity. And then I can continue to build those relationships from there. One thing is that your network amplifies. So once you find your own people that are like-minded, people that inspire you, people that see you intellectually, they tend to also have their own networks. And so that network effect just amplifies. And I end up meeting a ton of people I never would have met these relationships. So again, know your strengths, be authentic, and and try to double down on those pieces. And over time, that will pay back.
I know you mentioned that you have also dabbled a little bit in investing and angel investing, and so many people are really interested in that. What are your words of wisdom for people who maybe heard about it, would love to know a little bit more, but have no experience doing anything like that? Is it something that anybody can just jump into, or where do you get started?
Yeah, I would say I do have some words of wisdom there. One is, I think in terms of people who want to get started, there are plenty of different ways to get started. There are communities that you can join. There are both in-person as well as online meetups where you can meet other founders or meet other investors and learn about their journeys. There are syndicates that you can join and follow to see what people are investing in, how they think about it, how they break down the problem and make a decision. And that just gives you exposure to the different types of vehicles you can invest into, as well as, what the potential financial obligations are, because that's a huge decision personally. And also like there are a different level of commitments too. Sometimes you kind of just you put your money and you never really talk to the founder again, or sometimes it's quite heavy. It's a more involved partnership as you get involved in product development or introducing them to potential customers. So just learn first before you do. Another tip is as you start to learn, put together your framework. How would you make decisions? And be very, very clear and articulate what that framework is for you. Again, use your strength double down on what you know best. And as you evaluate potential opportunities, make sure you stay true. Don't be swayed. Make sure you stay true to your framework.
So I'm going to ask you a little bit about the time commitment on that.
Mm.
To me, it sounds like something that requires extra time in your day. And if you have a full-time job, it seems really difficult to be able to do that alongside. What would you say to people about that combination of activities, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's all about how you ruthlessly prioritize your time. So I'm a huge fan of the getting shit done framework. And I try to reread that book like every year or so and refresh my systems of how I manage and track tasks. But I have a pretty clear framework of what my priorities are for the year, what my priorities are for the month, how does that translate to my priorities for the week, and then day by day, every end of the week, I kind of map out what my next week should look like and make sure that maps back to those priorities. I break it down into like very specific tasks. There's a product manager speaking, so it's probably overkill, but for example, every month I might say, okay, I'm going to make a goal to talk to at least 3 people or look and try out like 3 new products online and just to learn. There's no obligation that I have to make certain amount of deals or deploy a certain amount of money. That's not how it goes. It's just more about meeting people and learning and spending some time just to discover so that I can inform what my next goal should be for my next month. And that can start light and make it achievable and easy. And then over time, you'll see, where do you want to spend more time? What gives you that passion? Like there are so many different avenues of engaging with budding startups that there's really no one size fits all. So down into small achievable goals and then just say, okay, I'm going to give myself a month to do this. What I like to do is I actually like to separate by days. So Friday is the day that I like to meet people outside of my company. Maybe I'll grab a coffee. Maybe I'll spend my lunch period just trying a new product just to see what they're up to, looking at launches or releases from potential startups. Maybe a friend sent me something and I want to dig into it a little bit more. Friday's my day to do that. I'm going to make sure I block some time to do that. You have to ruthlessly prioritize your time and just make sure you have a very clear task management system in order to start to explore these things. And obviously, I'm still doing my full-time job. You always have a little bit of time to do something a little bit different. And that should help you in your full-time job as well.
Yeah, it does seem like you epitomize the growth mindset and the way of living through like a constant learning, constant educating off your own brain. I think it's really unique, and I think a lot of people love to do it. But what is most challenging about keeping all of those kind of irons in the fire? It's
Mhm.
a great approach to the way the world is going right now.
I have a toddler at home. I can't spend as many hours as I used to on all the irons in the fire. So I got to cut down on how many I have out there and fill that time with spending time with my daughter or learning how to be a new parent. So now is the season to do so. And over time, I will probably redistribute how I spend that time again when we're out of the early childhood years. I've developed a lot of strong relationships with people over time. And so just because maybe I'm spending slightly less time on actively advising doesn't mean that I don't have those relationships. I still have those relationships and they're still strong. So that network will always help you and you should help it too.
Oh, that's great advice. I know a lot of people struggle with trying to do it all once they have a family, but I had a friend say to me once that life is an arc. So you have seasons, right? That has always helped me think of it that way as well.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
great way to think about it.
what things out there on the technological landscape are you excited about right now?
Most of us are probably using chat or similar on a daily or weekly basis. I use it a lot for new parent things, but the question is how to apply that to more complex, highly specific, contextual work situations. It starts to get more
Interesting.
Is when you wanted to make more decisions. And that's where I think a lot of companies are going to have to put together a vision for what is the future of work? How do we interact with AI in the future of work? Is it going to be agents that have their own specific job, and now the humans are just going to be orchestrating different agents? We're going to be elevated to reviewing and approving and making decisions across all of these agents that are doing things. How do they work together? At what point does the human step in? At what point does the human step out? That's the piece where that layer of decision making, I would say we need to define, and we really need to work on. We really need to hone how the AI actually performs. And I'm excited for that future. I think that's going to be amazing. And that's something that we're hoping to accomplish at Atlassian. We're working actively and on defining what that is and what teamwork is going to look like in that future. I feel like that's where technology is developing, and the way we work is going to change drastically, and we're going to have to adapt to that. But I think we will, adapt to that successfully. Humans have always adapted to technology advancements successfully over time. But that just means we're going to have to do more decision making and more orchestration. And there's going to be a lot of mental load for us.
Yeah. I love that you're taking a positive view. There's a lot of fear out there. If you have any advice for people who maybe are a little bit wary and hearing about AI taking jobs and things like that, what would you advise them to do to keep themselves relevant so they really can succeed as the future evolves here?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And this is probably a great way to circle back to some of the things we talked about earlier. Because I mentioned adaptability, and adaptability is rooted in that continuous learning and growth mindset. Other technologies in the past have also taken our jobs. We didn't have a dishwasher that would automatically wash your dishes. Now we do. The person washing the dishes is called the dishwasher, but now the item that washes our dishes is called the dishwasher. Now we do, and we don't even think twice anymore about that because we've adapted and we've learned about other use cases that really need humans to do this work. And I think I feel very positively that we will do that again because we are so adaptable, and humans are very intelligent. No matter how intelligent we think our ChatGPT is, humans are very, very intelligent. So we will, with that flexibility, with that continuous learning and growth mindset, we will be able to adapt. Use 10%, 20% of your time to try to put those feelers out there to see what new things interest you, to see where sparks fly. Double down on your strength and use that to kind of push yourself to start using some of these tools and figuring out where's your strength, where's that extra inspiration or extra intelligence or specialization that you have that AI doesn't have, that you can add more value, and you can leverage it as a tool for you to do even more than you've ever done before.
Yeah, that's great advice. What's your favorite AI tool that you're using today?
Oh, that's my favorite. I would say that on a daily basis, I use ChatGPT because I ask it everything. So it's on my phone and I talk to it. But from a work perspective, I like using Lovable. If you haven't used Lovable, it's a prototyping tool. It's very easy to use. So if you're not as technical, if you're a designer or product manager, you can go to Lovable. You can use an existing framework or use your own, and you can start prototyping a new piece of software or based on your current company where you're working at and start to reimagine how your product could look like. And then you can actually use that and test it in front of users too. So it's a really quick way of putting together what's in your head from a visual perspective and getting feedback on it and iterating on it. And it also makes asynchronous collaboration so much easier. No, I think it's a great tool, and I think it's very easy for folks to adopt.
So, well, I want to thank you for your time today, Jebna. Before we let you go, is there any place we can follow you and hear more about your thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely follow me on LinkedIn. And recently I've started using a product called Super Me, built by my friend Casey. It's an agent trained on your own professional knowledge. So I've trained my agent. I'm going to do a little bit more as well, but that's another place that if you're curious about different folks and they're based how they answer based on their professional experience, you can come follow us on SuperMe.
That's great. I'll ask you for that link later so I can include it in the information with the podcast, but that is fantastic. Thank you so much. You're just a fascinating person with so many different things going on. I think it's a great way of thinking about career as we move into the future. Having a single track career is probably not something that we can sustain. So you're a real inspiration. Thank you
So much. Thank you for having me.
This podcast is an original production of Women in Product. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the Women in Product YouTube channel. Leave us a review so that others can discover us, or share this episode with someone you know. Original music provided by Jenny Hahn. Thanks for joining.